Atvainojiet.
Okay.
So, speaker from the University of Göttingen, the director of the Department of Science of University of Latvia, the director of the University of Latvia Library, dear guests and dear ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Gita Rosenberga. I am librarian from University of Latvia. My daily work is related to open access to databases and to services for researchers. And today we have organized for you some good workshop, conventional and innovative methods of research assessment. And before we start, I would like to ask on the stage our director of the Department of Science, please.
Good afternoon, everyone, and online viewers. Department of Science of University of Latvia and the Library of University of Latvia are happy to introduce a new lecture cycle. Within we will help researchers and academic staff to help gain knowledge about how to maintain or how to create your research profile. How does publishers look on your profile, and how to get in better in higher level databases, and also what to search for in your where to search for some kind of cooperation, researchers, and etc. And the first lecture, as Gita already introduced, I'm asking to the stage Jan, who is, I don't know, will you introduce him? So who is a librarian, actually, with a great background of knowledge about how does publishers look at the researchers and how to create your profile to be noticed internationally. So, welcome.
So I got my own microphone because I will guide you through the workshop today, and it won't be just me but also my colleague Birgit Schmidt, who's now in Göttingen, and she was unfortunately not able to come, but she will present online. So let's see whether I find my presentation. Okay, great. So yeah, the topic of our workshop is conventional and innovative methods of research assessment. So this sounds very theoretically, and it may also sound very broad. What we try to achieve today is to give you just a short overview of research assessment principles. This will be presented by my colleague Birgit from Göttingen. We will then have a brief discussion. So please, this is a workshop, so I want you to talk with each other, because I really think it's a great workshop, not only to have librarians and research administrators in the room, but also researchers. So please talk with each other and discuss with each other. After this discussion, I will briefly introduce you in some data sources and metrics and methods, how you can present your work to the public. I will finalize with a brief demo about a typical analytical workflow if you are performing research assessment, quantitative research assessment. And after the coffee break, there's one exercise for you. This is group work, and you will be asked to prepare something and to answer a question. So, let's see. Maybe it still needs time to load the picture. I'm a bit confused. Okay, it seems that I only printed the first, or it only shows the first. So then we can switch to PowerPoint maybe. Still have a background. You do need to press. It's here, isn't it? This one? Yeah. So I apologize, I didn't embed the font, so some slides may look strange, but I tell you which slides look strange. So again, here's our agenda. Birgit will be presenting in the first round, and she will also introduce herself. So I am Najko. I'm working as a data analyst at the State and University Library in Göttingen in Germany. This library is one of the largest libraries in Germany. We have more than 400 staff working there, and my role is as a data analyst to analyze scholarly communication in order to inform decision making in the library and also in the university. My academic background is it actually has nothing to do with data analytics, or not much. I studied philosophy and library and information science, but during my study I started to do statistical programming, and that's how how my career turned from a typical librarian perspective, more book oriented, to someone who's doing actually data analytics. And yes, so that's me, and actually I don't know you, and would find it great if you could also introduce yourself. So this is now the introductory round. So would you, or can just pass over a microphone so that the okay. We'll just go anti-clockwise then.
My name is Marcis, and I'm a PhD student at University of Latvia. So
okay, great.
Elmira, biologist, senior researcher.
Jana, from Physical Energetic Institute, researcher.
Juris Dzelm, Institute of Chemical Physics, University of Latvia, leading researcher.
Anita Sašlāna, professor at Daugavpils University, at the same time visiting professor at University of Latvia.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Eva, and I'm a PhD student in environmental science in Latvian University.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Mārita Savic. I'm the director of the Library of University.
Hello.
Linda, a researcher, University of Latvia.
Hello, my name is Nāra Daina, University, Library of Latvian University.
My name is Diana Žēlastība. I am senior researcher of Riga Technical University.
Hello, my name is Laura Ardeva, and I'm working as scientific secretary at the Advanced Social and Political Research Institute, University of Latvia, and also as a lecturer at the University of Latvia.
Hello, my name is Ineta Kīvle, and I am Deputy Director of Academic Library of University of Latvia, and also I am a philosopher too.
Okay.
I'm Olga, and I am researcher from the Faculty of Business Management and Economics of the University of Latvia.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Anda. I'm a sociologist and researcher at the Baltic Studies Center.
My name is Guntis. I'm professor from Faculty of Computing, University of Latvia.
Hello, my name is Laura. I'm a scientific assistant in Latvia Forest Research Institute.
Hello, my name is Eduards, a PhD student, University of Latvia.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Aya, the same PhD student.
Hello, my name is Maya. I am a PhD candidate.
Saunders, physicist, associated professor and researcher in Faculty of Physics and Mathematics, University of Latvia.
Hello, my name is Ines. I am a PhD student, University of Latvia.
Hello, my name is Ineta. I'm working at Science Department of University of Latvia. Hello, my name is Lu Yan. I'm from China and now a PhD student in University of Latvia.
Hello, my name is Rita and I am a lecturer and researcher in Riga Technical University.
Hello, my name is Viktor Zurachos. I'm head of Ukrainian Information Center and Georgian Information Center at the Academic Library of the University of Latvia.
Hello, my name is Ilona. I'm librarian at the University of Latvia.
Hello, my name is Ilna. I'm system librarian of the Library of the University of Latvia.
Sure.
Hi, my name is Anna. My background is sociology and now I am a research project manager.
My name is Vadim Mantrov. I am a docent of civil law and researcher at University of Latvia, Faculty of Law.
Hello, my name is Ina. I'm associate professor at the University of Latvia.
Hello, my name is Ines and University of Latvia.
My name is Ligita. I'm from research department at the University of Latvia.
Hello, my name is Elmira. I'm from science department.
My name is Evija, science department, University of Latvia, and PhD student.
My name is Ilze. I represent HR department of University of Latvia and also PhD student in Tartu. So.
Hello, I'm Alexandra and I work in library in Latvian University.
Hello, my name is Kristaps and I am from Riga Getingenes University, Faculty of Law.
Hello, my name is Anse. I am from Art Academy of Latvia and I'm a PhD student there. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Andra. I'm a PhD student of University of Latvia.
Okay, great. So I heard before that this will be a very diverse group, and I'm really looking forward to present to you, but also to work together with you. And the next topic, or our very first topic, is giving you some background about research assessment principles and what's actually discussed now. And I would hand it over to Birgit, who's now in Göttingen and will present remotely to you. So I guess I need help to switch or to find the online presenting tool. Oh, so that's Birgit. Hey, Birgit. Okay. Birgit, can you hear us? Okay, it does not seem that Birgit can hear us. So yeah, you get a nice view. Actually, we are sharing an office, and that's how our office looks like.
So, I think I should start. Of course, and I'm glad to be here to present in this workshop. So together with my colleague who's with you today, I would like to introduce you to some of our thoughts on conventional and innovative methods and related to research assessment. And as you can see from the program, we have about 3 hours of time, and I start with a review of research assessment principles, but first a little bit on my background. I I have a PhD in mathematics, and after I moved to work in libraries, and also have a postgraduate degree in library information science. I'm a manager of projects related to open science in Göttingen, and I'm involved in many committees on data management and other open science related topics. Yeah, and the two of us are working in a unit which is called electronic publishing. We are not so much doing any research assessment, but of course we are managers of information, and open science is at the heart of our activities. So we look into what's actually going on in terms of implementing open science policies, including open access to publications and research data. And this is happening at the institutional level, but also nationally and at the European level through projects like the Open Air project. You might have come across this one. And Najko in particular is also doing data analytics in support of institutional proposal writing, benchmarking, part is on revisiting some ideas around research assessment. And of course this might feel like a rat race sometimes, in the sense of academic work is you work very hard and you aim to publish and you earn citations and you have to look into third-party funding, and this is basically something which never ends, and there's never something which tells you, okay, now you are doing fine, you can always do better. So, and have a look at the definition. What is research assessment? This is from a website where Henk Mertz, who was former head of the CW2S in Leiden, so a bibliometric expert, he put this together, and it's saying, okay, research assessment is about evaluation of research performance, and it measures, of course, what's going in, what's coming out in terms of publications and other outputs, and then you put some measures in terms of qualitative indicators and quantitative measures as well. So in summary, this is about evaluation, both the quality, which is typically through peer review, but also measuring in terms of quantitative measures and comparing with others. And you can of course look at different types of impact, scholarly or more society impact, and technological and economic impact. And there are many measures you could apply, and but from the point of view of the principles, aspects of research, of the process itself, you first of all have to decide what is the unit of assessment, a researcher, institution or research group or country or a network of people working across institutions, and you have to decide, is it disciplinary focused or is it across disciplines? And then there are the dimensions of this process where you say, okay, what type of impact I'm looking at, what is the context of this exercise, and is it about networking internationally or other aspects? And of course, here question is, what is the purpose of the exercise? What are the objectives? Is it about allocating funding in from a national perspective or institutional perspective, or are you looking into room for improvements in your institution to improve the overall image or your overall performance? So, and many indicators might match individually to these goals. So examples are, as said, allocation of funding based on research performance, typically looking into a specified period. For example, the research assessment exercise, now called Research Excellence Framework in the UK, is of this type. And in some other countries, of course, this happens as well. not so much in Germany. Yeah, but other exercises of this type is benchmarking across a bunch of institutions, might be nationally or of the same size across countries. And others are less of direct assessment type, which are more in the sense of you put information together and put this system to inform students and give them a flavor of what's actually going on, how well is the institution performing in certain research fields, what's offered. For example, the U multi-rank, which is not so much a ranking of universities, but an information system, is of this type, or at least emerged based on this idea. And then, of course, you have these self-assessments, which might happen in institutions from time to time to see how well the institution performs or certain areas. So, and I've, of course, noticed that you, as almost every university is always looking at these university rankings. There are many of these rankings, sometimes higher education, then this one which is here listed, the QS World University Ranking, then there's the U multi-rank and many others, and then you always think, okay, from what angle do I look at these rankings? From an international perspective, and you might be in a top 50, top 100, 200, whatever, or from the national perspective, or from the disciplinary perspective. So this rankings always is, is something one cannot really ignore, because this is then, it's of course based on important indicators like outputs and citations and things like that, which are used in many types of assessments. And of course, these rankings have influence on how you are perceived as an institution, what students think, what staff thinks, think if they should spend at your institution, and so on. So there is some degree of attention and discussion every year how well the institution performs. Same happens in Göttingen, and there's always good and bad news. And there's always this group of winners, or in the top 10 or top 50, there's not much movement. The occasional one moves up, the occasional one moves down. And there are, of course, also strong differences in the approaches. In the QS and types higher, there's a lot of weight on the scholarly academic performance, as at the publication output and the citations, but also teaching and how much industry income is there, and other indicators which are then combined to a rank with formulas which are never disclosed. Always a brief indicator on how they are put together and what weight they might have in the overall rank. So it's a bit of a black box exercise always, so a bit of the staging type, of course. Then there's another type I would like to talk about, is the scholarly impact measures based on, through the lens of bibliometric indicators. There you have a lot of dependency on products, on databases which are subscription-based, so like, of course, the Web of Science database and the Scopus database, and then products which use this information to compute indicators, in the sense of you can then compare institutions based on their outputs and citation percentiles and things like that. So other downsides of this approach are, of course, that again you have a lot of unknowns in terms of what is the coverage of these databases. They will never be completely comprehensive. They are quite good for the life sciences and engineering and the other hard sciences, but not so good in terms of coverage of literature which is from humanities and social sciences. So there will be other biases in terms of language and regional publication. So it's always with a grain of salt, but these are, of course, it is data which is used heavily in other contexts, like the university rankings. So, And some word of caution about, I mean, if you come up with your own estimates on what's actually going on in terms of publications, and the worst type of indicator in this context is kind of the journal impact factor, which is an average citation measurement for the last 2 years before this indicator is computed. But the thing is, it's a journal level indicator which does not say much about the individual article. As you can see from this plot, there are many publications which perform below this indicator. So you see the journal impact factor is at 25.3. Then you have the mean. You see it's a very highly skewed distribution, and the median is even lower. And there's actually also a recent study which compared the performance of articles in a dozen journals. So for about two-thirds up to 3/4 of articles in these journals have citation rates which are lower than the journal impact factor. So it's kind of exaggerating the impact of an individual article if you use this indicator. So better don't, but look at the actual uptake of individual articles, so you cannot really rely on the journal impact factor. So, and there has of course been a lot of criticism of this type. One is the statement which was released in San Francisco some years ago, and it was initiated by the American Society for Cell Biology, the scholarly society, and they also had some word of caution about the journal impact factor, to not use it in this way in terms of weighting publications and other advice. So they have a leaflet which you might have a look at. So for institutions, it urges institutions to really look at the content of papers to assess the quality, and then consider variety of indicators to get an idea what was the impact of this of these publications, and also look at a broader type of outputs, not just journal articles, but also of course books and research data and patents and other types of outputs which can have impact, of course, and have different types of impact. So, and other statements also in this direction are, this is from the bibliometric community, the Leiden Manifesto. So they came up with principles saying, okay, this quantitative evaluation should inform the qualitative, the expert assessment. So it should not used as a standalone, but can of course help to get an idea, and then it might not be necessarily that you say, okay, these are strong, so let's look at the other ones, in the sense of put a little more effort on the ones where these measures are not telling you enough about how well these publications perform, but they of course can have very strong value, which is not so easy to discover through these measurements. And other recommendations they come up with is always allow the ones who are under evaluation to verify the data and give access to this information, and just to make sure that you avoid this pitfalls, in the sense of you can of course very much influence the behavior through such assessments, which can have very bad effects on the institutional and research group level. That you have mistrust and and motivation is going down and things like that. So, and I wanted to look at two of these recommendations from the perspective of disciplines. Of course, there is then sometimes some information which is needed to inform what this actually means on a particular level. So this was a statement from the mathematical and statistics researchers community, and they of course also, since even before the Leiden principles came up. It's something they are very well aware of, that numbers are not about quality. It's an abstract concept, and then you lose some information, and it's needed that you maintain this link to a qualitative assessment. And when it comes to taking into account variations by fields in terms of publication and citation practices, this is from the London Mathematical Society, a statement they handed in the context of some assessment going on in the UK. So journal rankings is in mathematics, where there are many high-quality journals, and they don't look so much at the journal impact factor necessarily, and because there's of course a lot of loyalty to particular editors, and you respond to earlier published papers, so it's a conversation thing, and not necessarily always like you go for the highest impact factor journal thing, because that's a rather small community. And citation practices in mathematics have a long timeline. Of course, the half citation rate is much longer than in other fields, and sometimes the uptake is rather slow in terms of when you read a mathematics paper, then you need sometimes a couple of months to understand what's actually going on in terms of the details which you have to figure out, and then you can take this into account for your own research and might find some things you would like to respond to. So, and citations are better covered, not so much in the Web of Science, but in discipline-specific databases, like MathSciNet and German and American product. So that's it about the later manifesto. And then there's another report which is also almost only 2 years old, which is the metrics tied. This emerged in the context of the research assessment framework in the UK, or research excellence framework, and they looked into the role of metrics in these assessments, and of course also said, well, it would be good to come up with metrics of responsible type which are robust and transparent and diverse, I mean, to really measure what we would like to measure. And more specific recommendations include to be aware of the limitations of the indicators and be explicit with the criteria and transparency, and in terms of course, the data used, of course, and of course of the metric which are applied. So, and also some precaution against the general impact factor. So this is about the another exercise which is was initiated by the European Commission, which is, as you might know, a strong supporter of all kinds. They want to look into alternative metrics for both for dissemination purposes, of course, because these metrics emerge in the context of disseminating and responding to research, not necessarily only citations, but of course usage and other activities you have on websites, which can be researcher networks or websites like Twitter, where you share information about an article you found interesting or whatever. And these metrics are kind of candidates for evaluating research on a European level, and then seeing what is the uptake in terms of social media, which is of course closer to society or professions. And then you have for these metrics, of course, also some some challenges that you can have some people who are doing this intentionally. They promote their work heavily and things like that. So there's also some research going on where you would like to figure out better what these metrics are actually measuring, and which might be the ones who are when they assess what's actually the uptake of European funded research. So they come up with some recommendations. Also, like the Commission should come up with guidance on such metrics. So they have not given advice yet from this group on which metrics they actually recommend. This is something that we'll be doing in the next, likely within the next year. But they say, oh, let's work on this topic, and then we'll see. And of course, they would like to link this to open science to kind of measure what's actually going on in terms of uptake of these policies across Europe. So, as a last example, I'd like to turn to the Research Excellence Framework in the UK. There, of course, this is an exercise which is just the preparation has already started for the next exercise, and they're now, asking people to apply if they want to work on these committees and so on. And there has, of course, also been a lot of criticism in terms of this is a very costly exercise in terms of many man-months spent in these committees, and it's kind of a review, but also combined, of course, with bibliometric indicators and other indicators, but there has been some effects which are not desirable, that this undermines collegiality, that some people are very much under pressure, of course, and this is, of course, discourages collaboration sometimes and innovation, and others say it's redundant. There is this ranking stuff happening anyway, and there's a lot of overlap in terms of where these institutions end up in the ranks when you compare with these university rankings. And one researcher from who's also based in the UK, Will Hartzing, she recently came up with a correlation plot comparing an exercise she did in one afternoon, comparing citation ranks with the rank of the Research Excellence Framework, and as you can see, there's a very strong correlation. But of course, she also notes some issues in her exercise. Some institutions have issues with, you have sometimes issues identifying affiliations, so there is some overcount and some undercount. So, for example, Open University in the UK, they in her data processing exercise, there were institutional publications from other Open Universities based in, for example, in the Netherlands, matched with the Open University in the UK, though they have a high have a good citation rank, but maybe it's actually a little lower. And others have some undercount, which was Queen's Belfast. Some publications ended up with the Queen's University in the US. So, and there are other issues in the sense of course, the coverage of humanities, social science is not so good. She was using Microsoft Search for digging out data. So. But of course, I mean, this type of exercise is much less costly compared to the many people reviewing papers, and she says, why not just leave it as this, and let's have different types of reviews, and which is more forward-looking and not backward-looking, which is more into looking, what is the next thing you would like to do, and then having people reviewing this type of proposals. So I think it's a valid criticism, of course. So now you could think, okay, how about peer review? I mean, there, of course, you need both methods, the quantitative and the qualitative. I would still think of it, because I mean, you cannot really say what's in the paper if you just look at the numbers. So that peer review as such also has some pitfalls. It's of course still the main formal assurance mechanism for publishing papers and in this review of proposals. But there are, of course, things like, people. There's sometimes level of agreement. For the ones who are very good, there might be very strong agreement, but then you have this middle range where you have a lot of discussion. And then you might also have information which is not handled in a proper way. There might be some cheating from the ones who hand in the proposal, but on the other side, of course, also from the reviewers, that they use some information which should be handled confidentially. So a call which is getting stronger recently is to rethink peer review, and in the sense of openness, to have the full process disclosed, which can include reviewer names, review reports, comments from the wider research community and public, but there might also, of course, be degrees of openness that you have and when it comes to publishing, that you have a choice to say, okay, the review report is open by default, but maybe my name is not there, or the other way around. I mean, or you put your name intentionally when you act as a reviewer, that you say, okay, I disclose my name, even when there's no such explicit process in the journal. So something to think about. So I end up with some conclusions, which you will find implemented in the approaches Najko will present you. I think it's very important to have a clear definition of what you aim at, of course, and what is your target group. So a clear definition of procedures and the workflow as well documented as you can, in the sense of reproducibility, that you, when you collect your data, make clear where it comes from, and use open data as much as possible, and then process this information in a way which is not just baked into a commercial product, and then communicate this to the ones who are under review, in the sense that you use them for verification. Is this your publication? Which is, of course, something which is happening more and more, that institutions maintain this information in institutional information systems, or for bibliographic databases on the institutional and national level. But it's a lot of work, of course, to get this data ready for analysis. So then communicate your findings in a transparent way, what you intend to do with this information. So that's basically it. I'm ending on a funny note. So there was recently an announcement of a restaurant based in China, and they give some rewards to medical researchers. So the restaurant is called Lancet. So if you have publications in a high-profile journal, then they offer you some discount on the restaurant menu. And of course, it's a marketing thing for them, but I mean, it also has some nice consequences, that people meet there, which they haven't met for like 10 years. And so maybe sometimes it's not so important to say have big rewards, but also these little rewards, which of course institutions can come up with, not necessarily with the marketing thing in the background, but I think it might be worth to think about such things as well. So not just the formal assessments. So thank you very much for your attention. And here are some questions for your own. You can of course ask me questions or put your comments. But I also would like to know a little bit more what you think are bad experiences related to research assessment from your own perspective, or your institution or department perspective, and what methods have worked for you, and what your thoughts, recommendations are. So thank you. And of course there's a references slide. So
yeah, great. Thank you, Birgit. Can you hear us?
So I leave the discussion to the ones on site, because I likely will not be able to hear you.
Is it possible that Birgit can hear us, or?
I can watch the live stream.
Okay, so can you hear me? Or yeah?
I don't want to risk an echo.
Yeah, mute your phone.
So now I hear you.
Okay, Birgit, can you mute your phone, your mic? Okay, can you thumb up if you hear us? No, okay. So maybe
She can just choose live stream.
Okay.
Or I can write here.
Okay. Yeah, so we can simply...
Yes.
Sorry? We can simply chat with Birgit and pose a question to her. Do you have any questions for Birgit? Now you can hear us. Great. Perfect. So, Birgit, there are no questions or comments for you, but now I would simply ask you, what are your good or bad experience with research assessment, or have you ever performed such an assessment, or have you ever sat in such a board, or have you ever do you have to share some experience how it worked and what you found was a good practice and what you found was bad practice? You don't have to be concrete, you can also simply give an illustration or... Okay?
Okay, can I ask you a question? I'm a private researcher. I'm not working in the state system, but I was reading this before this conference. I was reading these like a short description. I received a short description from Gita, and I wish to maybe double ask you about this idea of this assessment. Is this like, for example, I received this short description that one method is that, for example, if you have if you have these citations as much as possible, then it's like if you have the maximum of these citations, then it's like the best result. And but my understanding is, if you work on the very popular thematics, then you could get very broad citation. Maybe, for example, it is known that the most popular book, the modern book in the world is, for example, about World War II, because the World War II was a very big event, and there are many people, many readers who wish to read about this big event. So my question is this, what is this, can somebody explain this this term, this research assessment? Is this like something like popularity, or I think there are two different things, like popularity or distribution, and the quality or the difficulty of research. Maybe somebody can do something what is very, very hard, but it has maybe very low demand. Or do you understand this?
Yeah, you're right. So research assessment is a very broad activity. So it has many different dimensions and also very different aims. So research assessment is actually not about who got all the citations available in the world, but it's about comparing or research with each other, but not philosophy with high energy physics, but to compare or to assess researchers among the work that has been done by the peers. So as Birgit said, research assessment must be very domain specific and subject specific. So giving an example in biology, you cannot compare someone who's working on human genome project with someone who's working on plant genomics. So these are very different fields with different kinds of how researchers are actually communicating with each other. So they have different journals, they have different peer groups, and that actually makes it a very hard activity, or that example is to show you how important it is to clearly define actually what the aim is of your research assessment, whether the indicators you are defining are appropriate to measure the research. So maybe if you want to measure the societal impact of research, you won't track the citations because researchers are citing researchers, and so yeah, I think Birgit, you had a great slide in the beginning with a good definition of research assessment as a multidimensional activity. I don't know whether we have lost Birgit again. Birgit, can you hear us, or?
There is a small delay.
Okay. 30 seconds, or? Okay. So yeah, I hope I could answer your question. Yeah, here we go. Great. Yeah, so it clearly shows you actually what is the unit of assessment. So you're comparing, do you wish to compare?
Yeah, there's some delay indeed. Sorry. Let me add to what Najko said. There was a recent article in PLOS, which is an open access journal, on sorry, the delay is a bit confusing. So the article I would like to point to is about the decline of insect biomass. So basically towards extinction. And this article has about over 380,000 views, and which indicates a lot of interest in the subject. But of course, it has not collected any citations yet.
Okay, any other questions? Yeah, this is actually a great paper that Birgit is citing. It's more like it's a review paper that actually lists or gives you a lot of examples of different dimensions that can be investigated during sessions. It's on the reference list that's on the last slide. So I think we will share the slides after the meeting, so you will find the paper. Although we have this delay, are there any other questions for Birgit? No? Then I would simply say thank you, Birgit. Can you hear me? See me, Birgit? Oh, but there will be also the delay. Yeah. So, yeah, bye-bye. And we will move to the next part. Which will be more practically oriented. So the question of the next part is, which is about data sources, metrics and methods, is about how to share and promote your scholarly record or the scholarly record of your institutions. And what I want to do, or what I want to present with you is to give you an overview of different CV profile services that you can use to promote your research and also to gain data about your research, how your research had an impact in the press, for instance, or in social media, or how many colleagues did cite your work, etc. pp. And all the services I present to you today are free to use. So you can simply start after the workshop to set up a profile and to work with the profile. But of course, I will also introduce you some pitfalls of some services. Apologies, I did not embed a form, so it's a bit messy right over here. But what I did is trying to categorize these different profiles before we start. This is like a matrix. There are two important topics of research assessment, which is, of course, the impact and productivity. And as Birgit already introduced, it's not about only tracking what you have published in scholarly journals or in scientific journals, but it's also about tracking how open is actually your research. Especially the European Commission wants researchers in the European Union to make their work openly accessible so that many people can read your work. But it's not only about journals. Now with many disciplines are now working with computational methods. So sharing of data and computational methods has become increasingly important in the last years. So it's not only a topic for physics any longer or for computer scientists, but for instance in Göttingen we have a lot of humanities scholars who are actually working with computers and doing like network analysis on different texts. So, and they produce a lot of code and a lot of data, and it's also about how to share and present and how to showcase your data and your code to other people. So this, and then on the impact side, I thought of distinguish impact between impact by means of citation, but also impact by means of usage, these so-called alt metrics or alternative indicators, but also how well the research is received in social media, just like Twitter or on Wikipedia. On the other side of the metrics, I distinguish between services that are aimed more for general science, so which are multidisciplinary, but also services that are more subject-specific, or of course there are also some institutional services available to maintain profiles. Nota bene, these categories are not mutually exclusive, and of course I did not list all profile services available. I won't have time to introduce you to all of them. And so that means that, of course, that there can be a service that tracks both citations and usage, but there can also be a service that tracks, that is very popular in one field like PubMed Central, and who highlights both productivity and impact. And the service I want to start is the ORCID services. Who of you heard of ORCID before? Hands up. No one? Oh, one, okay. ORCID is an initiative that started I think 5 years or 6 years ago, and the problem this initiative tried to tackle is name ambiguity. So especially Chinese authors have the problem that everyone seems to have the very same name, or that many people are sharing the same name, but also people from non-English countries really do have a problem of different spelling variants of their names when they publish. So when they have two papers, it's very, it can be quite common that one paper has one name and the other paper has another spelling variant. And that really makes it hard for people to track your research. And to overcome this problem, ORCID was launched as a non-profit initiative from publishers, but also from large database providers like Thomson Reuters, but also research libraries. And in ORCID, you as a researcher can register and get your very own ID. This is an example of a researcher from your university who actually has an ORCID ID. That's this 16-digit number right over here. And this number is used to...
You are currently the only person in this conference.
Yeah. Oh my God. And this number is now used, or can be used now by publishers, but also by digital libraries to uniquely identify you as an author. So when you write a paper, you can simply sign in with your ORCID, and then the publisher knows, okay, it's you, and you have written this paper with this ID 2 years ago as well, and can actually attribute you to these papers. ORCID is not only the number, but it also has a easy-to-use CV service. So like in this example, you can give some background information about yourself, so like where you received your PhD, about your employment, but also you can list your works under your name. Many institutions, or some institutions, have started to provide institutional support for ORCID, so that they ask all the researchers from their university to create such an ID and helped to set up an easy-to-use tool to promote this idea. And here's an example from the Chalmers University in Sweden. So because also Swedish researchers have the problem of spelling variants, and also that many people are sharing the same name, etc. And so they want, as an institution, that their researchers want to become more visible, but also that work is attributed to their researchers, so they have launched this initiative. I think most of you will be familiar with the Google Scholar author profiles. Who knows Google Scholar? Many of you are. And who of you has an author profile with Google Scholar? Yeah, great. And do you like it, your profile? Yeah? Okay, good to know. Yeah, so Google Scholar also allows you to claim publications they have, so that you can say, okay, these are my publications, and as a plus they calculate you how much your work was cited by your peers. And Google Scholar also have a little university or institution ranking. So here's like a ranking of University of Latvia researchers. Do you know your rank number? Or like, no? Okay, so these are the 4 persons with the that were cited most. Apologies, this is in German. I should have said in a different language for making the screenshot. However, although Google Scholar is quite popular among peers, there has been a lot of critics as well with Google Scholar. So one is that it's not actually transparent what they have in the database, because this database is closed source. And then it's also, some researchers say, the problem is that it does not only include peer-reviewed literature, such as journal articles, but also presentations or grey literature. So this makes it quite easy to get a higher number of citations, of course, when you allow more content to be indexed. And a very good example of this is that profile over here. I think we all did publish together with Alios, our most prominent co-author. And yeah, someone fooled Google Scholar and made this profile of this author. And of course, he has a high age index of 333. And I think it's a very nice example that illustrates you some of the weaknesses of Google Scholar, and also shows you how easy it is to game actually the indicator. So we are here, I'm not here to give you tricks how to game it, but it's quite easy, as you see over here. So it's not such a good source for research assessment, because it's closed access. You don't know actually what content is indexed. It's hard actually to know or to classify the work, so that you can really compare peers among themselves and not academics within philosopher. Yeah, and it's very hard to, very easy to game Google Scholar. Of course, we are here in the Microsoft Lab. I have to introduce you to Microsoft Academic. Microsoft Academic was recently relaunched, and I think they really did a great job. They contain now more than 120 million publications. Microsoft Academic is also free to use. And well, what's presented here is also a profile of your university. Today I learned that your university was founded 100 years ago. And it's sorted by relevance, but it can be also sorted by citations. And what I quite like, and what's similar to Google Scholar, is that they do not only display citations, what you see over here, but also present you with download links to free copies of full text, so when they found one. So it's also a functionality of Google Scholar, but if you don't find a full text in Google Scholar, you might also look in Microsoft Academic, maybe they found one. And what's also quite nice is they have a really nice citation functionality, so that makes it easy for you to cite this or to include this work in the references in your word processor. So it's just 2 clicks, and yeah, it's very, very nice. So here's an article level view of Microsoft Academic, and they also provide now the functionality to claim this work. So if it's your work, you can simply click on claim and add it to your profile. They also display you what works you referenced in this paper, or what work was referenced in the paper, but also display the citations for the publication. And they tell you sources for free full text, which is right here on the right-hand side. A big plus in comparison to Google Scholar is that they provide an API and also a data dump of the whole collection. So if you want to play with 120 million publication metadata, so feel free to download it from the Microsoft page. So it's a really great source. And the people behind Microsoft Academic, they're also publishing in computer science and present their methods to the scientific community. So there's much more transparency in comparison to Google Scholar. Who of you knows ResearchGate? Also many of you. Okay, great. So ResearchGate is actually a Facebook for researchers. It's like a social network where members from one university can network with their peers from other universities or within their university. And of course, they also have these kind of features that might relate to research assessment. For instance, they have the so-called total ResearchGate score, and which consists of different indicators, including readership, citations, but also journal indicator. So what they are actually doing is, and that's the reason why they gain a lot of criticism from the academic community, what they did is to use such a journal indicator, such as the journal impact factor, to assess the individual work of one researcher. So, and as Birgit has shown to you in the presentation, the journal impact factor does not relate actually to your actual work. So it does not mean that you publish very good work when you were able to publish it in a highly cited journal. So there's also a likelihood that your work will never cite it when you publish in Science. So that's the reason why there are many critics about ResearchGate. The good thing is with ResearchGate, they are so close, so they cannot be used for research assessment probably. So they do not disclose their data sources. So we don't know, even we as librarians don't know where they get their data from. We also don't know actually how the ResearchGate score is calculated, so they don't disclose the formula. So it's also very frustrating, and there are many other critics. Here's a nice blog post, and these researchers from the University of Graz in Austria, they try to reverse engineer the ResearchGate score, and they failed, and it's a lot of fun to read actually, and it really shows you many problems of this. Some of you are from the field of physics. You might know Inspire HAP, the digital library for higher energy physics. Who of you does know this source? Maybe it's too special. This is an example of a subject-specific service that can be used for research assessment, but which is also great for showcasing your work in the field of high-energy physics. The data sources are openly available, and also the source code of the digital library is openly available. And here are some of the dimensions actually that are presented for this researcher from the University of Latvia. So of course publications, but not only publications, but also the data sets he worked on. And he also co-authorships are listed, and the different publication types. What I quite like is is that they also try to put the work in context, so that they try to show, okay, is it now in a high-ranked, is it more high-ranked in comparison to other papers or low-ranked? So it's not about did this paper receive 100 citations, but about how does 100 citations relate to the overall citation distribution of this high-energy physics community. And of course, here we have also the problem of name variance and affiliations elicited as well. Here's an example from philosophy. So within the philosophy community, field papers is very popular to showcase your work. Who of you does know field papers? No one? But the structure is very similar to the other CV profile services. You list your affiliation, you are able to give a short introduction, and you can list your publications, including citations, but also usage. So if you upload your work to field papers and make it openly accessible, they also display you downloads, which might indicate that your work is becoming popular and more cited in the future, because there's always a time delay from publication to citation and can last many years when you're unhappy. So, and here's an example from Life Science Department. PubMed Central is a digital library for life science literature, and there you can also create author profiles which are interlinked with the ORCID, which I introduced in the beginning. And when you simply query for such an ORCID in the PubMed Central, you get such an author profile, in this case from Bernd Weiser, who is a researcher at Bielefeld University. And what makes it unique is that it uses the citations in PubMed Central, so, and that this data is also completely open for others to reuse. So you can reproduce such graphs when you're doing a citation analysis of this researcher. There's also next to the ORCID another icon, which is the eye, and that links you to another type of profile, a profile where you can list your alternative metrics. It's called Impact Story. It's founded by two persons living in Canada, in Vancouver now, and it's a non-profit in Canada. And what they do is, of course, listing publications and collecting publications for a person, but also collecting the number of online mentions over a particular period of time. With online mentions, they aggregate Twitter, for instance, Wikipedia, Facebook, or Google+. And what I like most of this profile is that they give you some badges, actually. So when your work is mentioned in a lot of Wikipedia articles, you get a Wikitastic badge. So that might be a kind of indicator that your work is groundbreaking, kind of, or your work explains something to the audience in a very easy way. So I think many researchers like, and their work is cited in the Wikipedia or in the XK. And what I also like of this profile is that you can showcase the proportion of work that you made openly available to not only to your peers, but open accessible to others. And this might help you when there's a kind of question during tenure, what's your societal impact, for instance? And you can say, I don't know my societal impact, but I made most of my work open access because I want also that not only my peers read my work, but also that it's available to professionals and practitioners, for instance. So you can. So an impact story really provides a nice way how you can present yourself, your open access share. I mentioned before that it's not only about typical literature, but that software contributions and sharing code is becoming much more important. And here's an example when you're writing on R libraries or Python packages, how you can present your impact so that your work has to the computer science community. Here's one from Karl Böttger, and he wrote a lot of packages that really helps researchers, and that is used thousands of times every month. So, for instance, with the software he wrote, he gained more than 100,000 downloads. So, and that's a huge number. His software also got cited in journal literature, and here's also a profile of his collaborators and also what kind of packages he wrote, or kind of software he wrote and shared openly. So, and this is also a free service. And what has become very popular is also GitHub, which is a social coding platform. So who of you know GitHub? So this is a great place. So when you're doing computational work during your research, so try to share them as openly as possible. So GitHub provides the means for doing it. You can also invite peers and other persons to collaborate on the software. And it also provides a very nice way of showcasing your work. In that case, here are more than 400 people that following Karl Böttger, who's now assistant professor in Berkeley. And it also shows, I don't know whether he has a good work-life balance, but it also shows his contributions in the last year. And also some of his most popular repositories he's working on. So there are researchers that are not only writing papers, but who are also who wrote very important software for the scientific community. And they can, for instance, showcase their work with GitHub, for instance. Of course, we now talked a lot about these kind of indicators, which are actually always like counts, and which you always need to interpret in context. And also in the software community, there's not only quantitative assessment, but it's also possible to qualitatively assess software. So in this case, this is an open science initiative around the statistical computing language R, called R OpenSci. And in order to become part of this initiative, your software is going to be peer-reviewed. So other researchers are actually reading every line of code and trying whether it works or not, and spending on average of 4 hours actually to read your code. So it's like reading or like reviewing a paper. And this kind of peer review has become a kind of quality indicator for this community. So they do not only add the number of downloads their package received per month, but also that there is actually that there was a peer review, and they link actually also to the peer review. So research assessment has always these kind of both broad criteria, so like qualitative and also quantitative, and often they go hand in hand, like in this case peer reviewed and number of downloads, for instance. Yeah, so to sum up, as you've seen, there's a variety of services that exist that allow you to showcase your work, or to find work of or to put work of your colleagues into context. Under the hood, most infrastructures are built on shared identifiers like the ORCID, but also the DOI. So this is the identifier you get when you publish a paper with Elsevier, for instance, but also with lot of other journals, and these open services really provide a very rich source of curated data that can be reused not only for research assessment. And we want to encourage especially librarians and research administrators not only to look into the Web of Science because of all its pitfalls, but also to consider other services where researchers can actively part and shape their very own profile. Of course, there are also some limits. One is CV fatigue, so I don't know whether it makes sense to have 10 online CVs and to maintain it, so it can be very time-consuming. From a data analytics point of view, there are various business models behind these platforms, and also various access levels. So I don't know whether every service is sustainable, so whether it will exist in the next 5 years, and also it can change that, and also the business model can change every time, so coming from freemium to closed or otherwise. A huge problem is also for us to assess actually the indexing coverage of all these different services, so what's actually included in these services. And what's nearly impossible is actually to examine the overlap between these services. So this is really research work, and very interesting research work. Yeah, and then as we have seen in the example of et alios, there's always this tension between manually and automatic data curation. So should we trust more like automatic ways of creating these profiles, or is it important that researchers create these profiles for themselves and have actually control over their profiles? Yeah, so before I go to the demo, I simply want to ask whether you have any questions, or if you want to add some services that you use to your colleagues. And it is a workshop, so you're required to collaborate, and it's not... Yeah, so Academia Edu is also a great example of a social network used by many, I think by many scholars from the humanities and social sciences. Are you using Academia?
I've been receiving mails requiring me to log in because there are people citing me, but I'm resisting for the time being.
Okay. Yeah, so this is also maybe one of the limits or pitfalls of these services, spamming. And yeah, so I also received a lot of emails from ResearchGate, and I'm also very tired of it, yeah. Any other comments or questions?
To what extent do these platforms address this issue of science communication, namely not scholarly communication, but communication to the public, like not academic publications, but other sources? Yeah, so of course it differs. So services like Impact Story try to track this kind of public engagement or this scholarly communication in the way that they try to track also press materials. But there's also a service called Oddmetrics, and they do a great job actually to track your research in newspapers and magazines. So I think in the demo we will have an example of Oddmetrics. But here again, it's a problem how to operationalize such scientific communication. So is it, so with these kind of indicators we never know why it was cited, so or mentioned in the newspaper, and yeah. But yeah, if you want to keep track of whether your work was mentioned in the news, then maybe oddmetrics.com might be a great great source for you. Yeah, for instance, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was once cited in Germany's largest or most prestigious newspaper, and it was completely false and nonsense. And I was so embarrassed by this notion. So also I wouldn't put it on my CV. Yeah. Okay, so I thought, I don't know, what time is it? Is it 3:30 or? Oh yeah, okay, great, we are good in time. I thought for the last 20 minutes, I just briefly introduce you, or we just play around a little bit with these kind of different data sources that we have. And as I introduced you to, I work as a data analyst, and I simply want to introduce you to how I work when I need to track down some usage of my university, or of some research groups. And what we are doing now is we are investigating whether and to what extent scholarly work from the University of Latvia was cited in Wikipedia and Twitter, and work that was published in 2017 based on open source and open data sets. So this will be the task of the next 20 minutes. And a typical data analyst, and also maybe a typical empirical researcher, always works in this kind of data sciencey fashion. So there's always the problem of importing data, because data comes from various sources and various formats. You need to have interfaces to web services, for instance. What actually takes most of the time of my work is tidying the data. So data, especially data from other people, is always messy. So you always try to clean up. It always takes like 90% of my work actually to tidy data. And then you try to understand actually what this data represents, and there you are transforming the data, you have your research questions, you try to model your data, and you try to visualize your data in order to understand actually what's going on and what is represented. And then it's about communication. It's how to communicate your exercise. And here we use at Getingenes University not only reports, but also dashboards, so that you can dynamically click on an indicator and it depicts some useful information. So, and what we are trying to do is to track down publications from researchers affiliated with the University of Latvia. Sorry for the misspelled university name, that are indexed in the Web of Science and published in 2017. And I want to introduce you to a new service that was recently launched. It's called the Crossword Event Data Service. And this is a great service for tracking down mentions in the social web, but also in Wikipedia, because it's totally free to use, and they disclose also all the software that they're using and also the data that they're using. So you don't need to pay any euro to work with this kind of data. And as Birgit has mentioned, in I think one of her last slides, also in research assessment, analysis should be transparent and reproducible to others. So I will use an open notebook in order to track and log actually what I'm doing. And I created
I don't know how I now change to a web browser in order to. I'm not allowed to close anything. And show you some of the work. So I'm actually now opening a statistical computing environment for the programming language R. Is someone of you familiar with this programming language? It's like if you're doing statistics, so you might know this language. It's quite powerful, and you don't need to know much code, or you don't need to have much coding skills. And yeah. Okay, I simply log in. We are prepared. It takes a couple of seconds to open this. Maybe to explain what's going on for those who are not familiar with this. I will work in this kind of document over here, and this is actually a console that executes code, and this kind of stuff you can simply ignore. And what I'm starting with is a typical spreadsheet that you find, or that discloses bibliometric information. This is actually the spreadsheet I downloaded from the, I will make it larger. Try to open it again. Okay, great. And such spreadsheet I'm not used to work with. Okay, right, over here. And such bibliometric data set often contains this kind of information that you have authors listed, what you see right over here. So every row represents one publication of the University of Latvia, and each column represents a bibliometric variable. In this case, it's author, so it's a string of all the authors that they have worked in. It's also full names, the title of the work, and also the sources, so the journal in which the work was published. So yeah, these are typical bibliometric data sets, how they look like. And what's actually quite interesting is that these bibliometric data sets also try to track ORCID IDs, so that makes it easier for the analysts to track down who actually published this work. And also some metadata, so that for librarians, and MDI, which is the digital object identifier, so the unique reference to your scholarly publication. And what I'm doing now is to simply call this kind of cross-web event data service and ask whether they have any social mention for each publication. And the result actually is listed right over here. It's very complicated to read actually. So what we try to do is actually to count. So how many references have we found in these various sources? And here this is summarized. So that means this table that for the 250 publications from the University of Latvia in this year, we found 478 references in Wikipedia, and for instance 108 references in Twitter. So it's simply by querying or by merging two different data sets, we can do a very nice analysis actually of the social impact of the research from the University of Latvia. And you might also be interested about which articles are discussed and which are heavily discussed on Twitter. And of course, you see right over here, it's a typical long tail distribution. And here's one article that was discussed 44 times after publications on Twitter. And we can simply have a look what this article is about and whether we find any further evidence about the impact of this article. So I open this DOI, and yeah, it's about biometeorology, this paper. And what's quite interesting to see right over here is that also publishers are sharing these kind of indicators with you. In that case, they also track some social media shares. And this is now a link to altmetric.com, the provider I recently mentioned. And that also tries to collect tries to collect the tweets that mention this paper. What you might recognize is that altmetrics.com found 46 tweets, and in our case, only 44 mentions are tracked. So this is actually a huge problem of these various social media bots that are deployed by these various Altmetric data providers, because they always work differently, and sometimes there are also some also different business models are behind. So Twitter is actually having an open plan, but it's also selling its data, and of course it sells more comprehensive data for these kind of analysis. So it's always worth to compare both services, because in many cases the number of tweets won't be the same when compared across different services. So there's a huge transparency and comparability problem actually. Okay, and now let's see, after we got the articles discussed on Twitter, what articles are actually referenced by Wikipedia. And here seems to be an article to be discussed quite often by Wikipedia. But when you look at the subject title, this is actually a file that is referenced. So what Wikipedia does is, Wikipedia also has some bots that that crawl open access content, and when they found movie files or image files, they automatically imported it to the Wikipedia. So when you have many pictures or many figures in your open access paper, it's very likely that you're having a high Wikipedia account, because they simply crawled your articles so that your images and your videos are included in the wiki database. However, there are also some great examples of other Wikipedia pages that reference work. These are other subject titles of what's actually referenced. And here's also a Wikipedia article in German that reference work done at the University of Latvia. So yeah, let's examine a very last example. Too many windows. I always copy it twice, oh, don't I? Do I? Okay, last, okay. Here we go. And this example is actually a paper that received a lot of attention in the last years, and it's about the conservation status of freshwater mussels in Europe, where also researchers from the University of Latvia participated. And I actually was actually looking for also such a metric donut. Ah yeah, here we go. And that work was also quite often in the news. So as you see here, at the article level, 13 news outlets reports about that study, one blog. There was also some traffic on Twitter, and also many people have used this work in their reference manager. And here are actually the reference to the news that cited this study, and there was also a German news report about that study. Yeah. So this is simply to give you an impression how easy it is to collect these data, but how carefully you must be with the interpretation of the data, because especially when you try to compare different data sources, and also to give you an impression about what different profile services you can use, either to track the impact of your research, but also to showcase your research. And before we start with your exercise, there's coffee break, isn't it? Yeah, great. Do you have any questions before we go to the coffee break? No, you're tired, aren't you?
Thank you for the first part.
Okay.